and welcome back to how Hamilton works musically.
The Stay Alive theme is first heard in Right Hand Man when Burr introduces Washington.
We are outgunned, outmanned, outnumbered, outplanned.
That sounds a lot like a James Bond movie scenario, and in fact, the music that's supporting this moment is a direct reference to James Bond. You start with a perfect fifth, go up to the augmented fifth, and then go up to a major sixth, and then back down to the augmented fifth, and then back down to the perfect fifth. Some people may call the augmented fifth the minor sixth, but I'm calling it the augmented fifth because it essentially works by acting as a neighboring tone to the fifth. See, the perfect fifth is the most stable musical interval, other than the octave, of course. So going up to the augmented fifth destabilizes it and wants it to come back down to the perfect fifth. And you see this musical tension being used all over the place. In John Carpenter's theme for Halloween, in the funeral march from Chopin's Piano Sonata No. 2, to even a classic hip-hop song about the tense struggle to not throw away your shot. Of course, I'm talking about Eminem's Lose Yourself.
If you had one shot, one opportunity.
Just to define a couple terms, chromatic means going from one note to the note directly either above or below. So if it's C, then a chromatic note next to C would either be C sharp or B. This is also called a half step. A whole step is made up of two half steps. So a whole step up from C would be D, and a whole step down from C would be B flat. So you might say that the James Bond vamp consists of a chromatic melody over a minor chord. If we can figure out how this theme is operating in James Bond, perhaps we can figure out what it's doing in Hamilton. So what does the James Bond theme represent? In some ways, you can say it represents the protagonist.
Bond. James Bond.
But it doesn't just represent him as a person, it represents the situations that he finds himself in. Perhaps that's why the theme usually comes in when he's doing something badass at high speeds, sometimes in vehicles with a phallic significance. Whether he's being chased by villains or whether he's chasing a villain, the vamp going up and down is asking a question. Will James Bond survive? But without any resolution, it leaves us in a state of constant tension, a nightmare of sorts. In fact, when jazz bandleader Artie Shaw used the vamp in 1938, he named the song Nightmare. And when we meet Washington, this is exactly what he's facing. We hear this theme represented in the bass in what I'll call the heartbeat theme. The heartbeat theme here includes the vamp from James Bond, but it also appears without the vamp, leaving us with just the heartbeat.
Can I be real a second? For just a millisecond, let down my guard and tell the people how I feel a second.
Where you can hear the repetition of the tonic note, symbolizing the adrenaline that's pumping through one's blood during a fight. And for variety, we hear the theme again in a synth pad.
I'll write to Congress and tell them we need supplies. You rally the guys, master the element of surprise.
The theme gets brought back in Stay Alive, but this time it comes equipped with a falling run that outlines the theme's progression. The descending nature of this run gives us both the feeling of movement, but also being underneath something that is tumbling down toward us. This is the music warning us that the threat of death is just around the corner. And this falling run is combined with the heartbeat theme, further emphasizing the danger. We also get the heartbeat-only version in Meet Me Inside.
Meet 'em inside, meet 'em inside, meet 'em inside, meet 'em inside.
The heartbeat theme comes back again at the end of Cabinet Battle number 1.
You wanna pull yourself together?
I'm sorry, these Virginians are birds of a feather.
Young man, I'm from Virginia.
In a direct mirroring of Act 1, Washington is once again warning Hamilton of a dangerous situation. But this time, it's not physical danger, but the danger of not getting his debt plan through Congress. He's urging Hamilton to get the votes. And we can hear this change in stakes in the orchestration. Alex Lacamoire places the heartbeat theme in pizzicato strings, which are a lot less menacing and which we previously associated with the cautious Aaron Burr. For example, in his verse from My Shot.
Geniuses, lower your voices. You keep out of trouble and you double your choices.
Now, as we've seen from previous videos, if Lin-Manuel Miranda is even bothering to set up this musical motive, it must be for a reason. And here we do see the musical architecture at work. If the Stay Alive theme is truly about danger, then we'd also hear it when other dangers are present. And sure enough, lurking in Act 2 is a terrifying danger that has been plaguing the men of our political establishment from the time of Hamilton all the way to the present. By this, I mean women? And unlike the dangers of fighting in a war, Hamilton actually falls victim to this. Believe it or not, the Stay Alive theme does show up in Say No to This, but it's somewhat hidden because it's in the major mode.
I hadn't slept in a week, I was weak, I was awake. You've never seen a bastard orphan more in need of a break. Longing for Angelica, missing my wife.
Now, having this theme in major is quite different from having it in minor. As we've already seen, the minor version conjures up nightmare and even is related to Halloween and the funeral march. And a lot of the reason for this is because in the minor mode, the augmented fifth going to the sixth and back down to the augmented fifth just serves to reinforce the minor chord. In major, however, when you go up to the augmented fifth, it kind of sounds like a leading tone going to the minor sixth chord. In the key of C, G is the fifth and G sharp is the augmented fifth. Now, why does this augmented fifth want to keep rising to the sixth? Well, if we drop down the C to a B, this augmented chord actually becomes E major. And of course, E major is the dominant chord to A minor. In more advanced theory, a secondary dominance. So functionally speaking, this augmented chord is acting as a substitute for E major, pushing us to A minor, or the sixth chord. And that makes the augmented fifth, G sharp in this case, the leading tone that wants to rise up to the sixth. You are going from major to minor with this upward motion, almost as if you're striving for sadness. And we can see this theme going back through the ages as well. In 1916, Carinoso is a Brazilian song about unrequited love. In 1946, Kurt Weill used it in an opera called Street Scene in an aria called Lonely House, which is a guy basically singing about unrequited love. And in 1960, Adam Faith's Poor Me uses it in a song also about unrequited love. I think I see a pattern. And that's not the only pattern here. It turns out the same guy who orchestrated and arranged Poor Me, John Barry, was hired 2 years later to orchestrate and arrange the James Bond theme. In all likelihood, the James Bond vamp was his idea. And in another musical theater context, the Kander and Ebb song, Nowadays from Chicago, also features this.
They didn't even want my picture. I can't understand that.
In the song, Roxy Hart is at her lowest point. She's won in court, but she's no longer in the public spotlight and has lost the fame that she built her self-worth around. So we see that the major version of this progression deals in longing, either for the way things once were or for the way things ought to be. So in a way, if the minor version of the Bond theme represents battling danger head on and always being on the precipice, The major version of it represents what happens when you've fallen from the precipice and are licking your wounds and trying to make sense of a loss. And one way this motive is handled in the major key is that instead of coming down, it continues to augment up to the minor seventh. In the key of F, we get C, C sharp, D, and E flat. In Say No to This, we're in the key of A major. That means the vamp starts on E and goes to F, F sharp, and G. Add the melody and you get So am I reading too much into this connection between Stay Alive and Say No to This? Maybe it's just a coincidence that they share a musical similarity. After all, one version is in minor, the other is in major. One version's about Nightmare and James Bond, one's about Lonely House and Poor Me. One is George Washington going to war, and the other is lust and infidelity. One version goes up and down and up and down, the other goes up to the minor seventh. These two versions seem worlds apart, except in this one moment.
Nobody needs to know.
Lin actually lets us know his intentions at the end of the song, where he lays bare the chromatic melody in the strings. Without a chord underneath the vamp, we don't know if it's meant as the minor version or the major version. An eerie lack of resolution and almost disoriented quality. Now, hypothetically speaking, we could say that this is the minor version because the affair and the extortion is a ticking time bomb, providing constant tension in Hamilton's psyche and will eventually explode. But it also represents a moment of loss, a falling from grace. Hamilton has failed to stay true to his own ethical ideals, not to mention his love for Eliza. Technically, with 4 ascending chromatic notes, this is the major version, but without any chords underneath, that distinction seems rather meaningless. Without minor or major, Lin is evoking both versions, both meanings at the same time, and musically in one broad stroke, danger and longing, tension and regret are brought together with nothing more than a basic chromatic melody. The next time we get this vamp is in One Last Time. Again, it is underscoring George Washington. But unlike his first appearance, where he was talking about all the dangers that awaited them, Washington is talking about diffusing danger rather than attacking. So we find the heartbeat theme diffused as well. We're in the key of G minor. We get the perfect fifth, the augmented fifth, but then the harmony shifts a step down to F, denying the minor chord of its tension. And when Washington drops the bomb about Jefferson resigning, the music drops down another step to E flat. So we can hear in the music that he's gonna step down even before he says it. In fact, the entire song, One Last Time, is built around this idea of a chord that is taken down a whole step. Just as Washington is stepping down, the music is literally taking a step down. You can hear this illustrated perfectly in the call and response section, where Hamilton argues that Washington should not step down in E flat major, and Washington rebuts him in D flat major.
Mr. President, they will say you're weak.
No, they will see we're strong.
Why do you have to say goodbye?
If I say goodbye, the nation learns to move on.
In the Reynolds pamphlet, we hear the theme again, albeit transformed. Rather than hearing the fifth become augmented, we hear an augmented fifth be diminished back down to a perfect fifth. Whereas the Stay Alive theme tends to sound like a question, unsure of what's about to happen, here in the Reynolds Pamphlet, it sounds final, as if it's a hammer nailing down. And it's fitting because the lyrics on top of this are,
Well, he never gonna be president now. Never gonna be president now. Never gonna be president now. Never gonna be president now.
as final and definitive a statement as any. The next time we hear the Stay Alive theme in the major mode, it's again with a woman, this time Eliza, and just like in Poor Me, she has been cheated on. Near the end of the song, Eliza finally burns the letters, and it is accompanying this moment that you hear the augmented fifth rising to the minor sixth chord.
You forfeit the place in our bed. You'll sleep in your office instead.
This is further emphasized by the fact that the augmented fifth is doubled in the bass, giving it an even more dissonant quality. And if you add Eliza's melody from the Schuyler Sisters, it sounds like this. But knowing just how good-natured Eliza is, and having had her rage, she finds her way back to Hamilton. In Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story, the dissonance from the augmentation has been quote-unquote fixed. Now instead of a D major augmented fifth, we get F sharp major. The chord that is used in the Alexander Hamilton chord progression. In a sense, Eliza is rehabilitating Hamilton from the stain of his infidelity, resolving it in harmony with Alexander Hamilton's ambitions. The final instance of the Stay Alive theme is in the Stay Alive Reprise. In this song, we hear the heartbeat theme reduced further and further until all that's left is literally the heartbeat without a melody, foreshadowed by the line from My Shot where Hamilton asks,
Is it like a beat without a melody?
and when the musical beat stops, we know that young Philip's heart has stopped as well.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
6, 7, 8, 9.
Good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
He couldn't do what the music was telling him to. He couldn't stay alive. And after tracing this theme through 9 songs, we see that the action movie trope was there all along, setting us up for a tragedy.